Welcome to yet another episode of Shortcast Over Coffee. Today, my guest is Prem Panicker. Prem has been a journalist for over 30 years and was one of the 7 journalists who were part of the Rediff.com startup team. He has written and edited features extensively for various publications. In this episode, I talk to Prem about his growing up days, his journey with addiction, and how he came out of it, early career in journalism, covering cricket and climate change. It's a long 2 hour episode, so brace yourself for a fantastic journey through Prem's life. Please do like, share, and subscribe this channel as it will help us get such great guests on the show. For all the audio files, do check out the show Shortcast Over Coffee on top podcast platforms like Spotify, Apple, etc. Now, without further ado, let's get right into it. Hello, Prem. Welcome to the podcast.
Hi, Bala. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, Prem, from what I understand, you were quite an accidental journalist. And for someone who was an accidental journalist, I just have to read this tweet from Harsha Bhogle, which says, "Quote: From the first time we met 30 years ago, I have really looked up to Prem Panicker. Nobody strings together thoughts at his speed, and he is in good form even today." He was referring to one of your articles. For someone who started off as an accidental journalist, how did you know that journalism is what you wanted to get into? I mean, how did that accident happen? Would you like to walk through that period of your life?
Yeah, it was kind of, I think growing up, I wasn't quite sure what I wanted to do. Um, you have to remember that this is a different time period altogether, generations back. Um, so mostly I was doing what others wanted me to do, my parents, for instance. They saw that I was academically good. Uh, Not because I was trying for ranks or, you know, getting obsessed with studies. I spent more time playing than studying, but somehow I used to get good marks, and that I think triggered ambitions in my parents and my relatives, etc. They wanted me to go in for medicine, which back in the 70s and all that, it's either medicine or engineering, just a kind of default settings. Uh, I figured out pretty soon that I didn't want to do that. It didn't register with me. It's not an ambition that I share. Um, you're talking of a generation that, particularly a joint family. There wasn't really uh, it is those kind of families are not geared for conversations. The kid doesn't get to actually say, "Look, I don't want to do this." You just listen and you obey. Um, which wasn't me. So since my choice of subject was determined by others, I basically just go for it. Um, and at some point, I mean, various things happened. There was an interview with drugs and stuff that led to my having to leave Madras because I was studying at the time. I was sent back to Calicut to be with my grandparents, studying in Malabar Christian College in Kozhikode, uh, where they switched me from the science stream to the straight economics. I presume there was some thought of my being an IAS officer, which also didn't. I mean, I had an IAS officer family, and uh, I didn't see why I would want to do that. So ultimately, while I was in college, I was playing sport, uh, drama, music, all of that, everything except studies. And I ended up just dropping out, at least in the sense that when the time came for the annual exam, I just didn't write my final exam. Uh, I don't think I had a very clear idea why I was doing that or what the consequences would be. I discovered that afterwards because you're talking of a time when you walked in for any interview, any kind of job, and the first question was, "What is your educational qualification?" And if you said dropout, that was the end of the conversation. So there was a period of stasis that lasted for about 7 to 8 years almost. Uh, I did various part-time jobs, little things here and there. I was a steward for a bit. I was a front office thing for a bit, and uh, but none of them were steady. Uh, None of them really made me think, okay, I can make a career out of this. Uh, so at some point when it got really dark, I was stepping back and saying, okay, why the hell did I why did I drop out? What was my problem? And thinking things through, I realized that just about the only thing that I really liked all the time was words, whether it is reading or writing. My journal, I used to write these long letters to certain friends, uh, mostly about contemporary affairs and things like that. And I realized I liked that. Coincidentally, a letter to the editor that I wrote at the time for there was a in Indian Express, they had a section called You Think, which is a amalgam of you and ink, one of those cutesy kind of labels, but basically it was for young people to write. Uh, I'd written a letter to the editor of that particular section, Aditi Day. She called me over to the office and said, I like the way you write. Uh, would you want to try something out? And then she sent me for one event. It was supposed to be a 150 word report on some 150, 200 word report on some arts event that was going on. But while talking to the people, the artisans, and even the person who put the uh, exhibition together, I realized that there was a human story. Um, so I went back to Aditi and said, look, I can do the review of the program if you like, but there is this story and I found it fascinating. So she said, okay, fine, go ahead and write. Uh, I wrote it. She liked it, occasionally started giving me, not a regular job, but occasionally started giving me these little gigs. And I think that's kind of when I realized that I liked doing that. Except that, again, I bumped up into this thing of if I wanted to be a journalist, they still wanted to know. In that same Indian Express, for instance, there was a call out for trainee reporters. I applied. HR, the first question again was, what's your educational qualification? I said, dropout. And the conversation ended right there. And I tried pointing out that my byline was again in the 18. The longer pieces that Aditi was commissioning was actually bylined and paid for. But apparently for a full-time job, that wasn't going to work. So basically it was trial and error, and ultimately realizing that just about the one thing that right from my childhood on, the one thing that I really liked doing was either writing or reading. And yeah, at some point, I guess things turned around. I got lucky. There was a part-time, not a part-time, actually, a trainee reporter gig at Free Press Journal in Bombay. Not for any major salary. I think at that time it was $72 a month. Uh, this is back in 1989. Then again, the kindness of friends, strangers, somebody gave me a roof over my head and food when I was at home, etc. And it worked out. Touch wood. So yeah, that's
Yeah, you mentioned about growing up in a traditional, joint family, and you did your first part of your college in Madras Christian College. Uh, I mean, Madras Christian College is one of the most reputed colleges, and I'm pretty sure it was greatly reputed back in the day as well. So, would you say that your upbringing was quite privileged? How was that like?
yeah, it was privileged in the sense not that I came from a very well-off family. Both my parents were government employees, but it was privileged in the sense that they were willing to do whatever it took for both me and my sister to get the best education possible. So uh, once I moved, I mean, I was brought up by my grandparents initially, and then I moved to Chennai to be with my parents, or at least my parents took me back to Chennai when I was about 11 or so. Uh, and after 1 year, I was enrolled in Madras Christian College High School, which again was one of those, I hate to use the word, but one of those elite institutions at the time. Uh, they were autonomous, both the school and the college, so they didn't really believe in the state syllabus. What they did was their syllabus was straight out of the Oxbridge system. The textbooks were from England. Um, Almost all the professors or the teachers were trained in England. So yeah, I mean, and if you were studying in the school, one of the things that they did was when you got to the 11th standard, they had an internal exam, still with their own syllabus as opposed to the SSLC syllabus. And if you got 80% marks in that exam, which is held in January, you just went straight to the college and registered for the course of your choice or your parents' choice in my case. But you registered for the course and it didn't matter. All you had to do was pass the SSH, the official government exam. So we didn't even have classes in that. They just said, look, I mean, these are the textbooks, you study it. It's no big. So yeah, I would say it was privileged in that sense, in that the institutions that I was, that my parents put me in in retrospect, considerable cost to themselves and considerable hardships, were all encouraging of things that are not really part of the education system. You were encouraged to read on your own, not just the syllabus, but things off to the side of the syllabus. You were encouraged to write. You were encouraged to communicate. Debates, etc., were very, very important. You actually got taught how to debate. So yeah, I would say that we also had, for instance, the sports stream was very, very good. I remember in 10th standard, my coach Satwinder Singh was playing Ranji Trophy. In my 11th, it was S. Venkatraman, who was then a national player. He was actually playing for the India team at the time. And, he was also coaching our school team. So it was that level. So yeah, I mean, that part of it was lucky.
Yeah, interesting. And I have had Amit Verma on this show, and then
Yeah.
I was asking him how his whole penchant for reading or his reading habit came about, and he was telling me how his dad used to read a lot, and he was surrounded by books growing up. And you also mentioned about the fact that you had this liking for words and you had this liking for writing.
Mhm.
Do you think your education in such an elite, so-called elite institution, shaped you to be a writer or have this, love for words, or was it something at home?
I think it was a combination of both. My father, my uncles all read, and being in a joint family, initially when I was staying in Calicut with my grandparents, but even subsequently summer holidays, for instance, we went there, and a lot of the conversation over lunches and dinners used to be them talking about the latest books that they had. You had, for instance, various things like there's this publishing house called Current Books, which brings out Malayalam novels, non-fiction, everything. And if you subscribe, you had an annual subscription, which basically meant that every month, I think you got to choose 3 books, which would be sent to you just for the postage. You didn't pay for the books themselves. So what my dad and uncles used to do was they would go through the catalog and each would select a different set of books. So effectively, there were about 12 to 14 books coming home every month. And there would be these uh, fairly serious discussions about what these books were about. It was also a good time for Malayalam literature. But the dad and one of my uncles were also into English books. So you had pretty much obviously the Russian authors, because back then that was the prevalent sort of obsession. but also the French authors, various books in translation, various books, all kinds of books, novels, I mean, fiction, non-fiction, it was all there. And unlike today, when you can, when you get interested in something, either an author or a genre, you have the means to look up what else this person has done or what else is good in this genre, and follow a thought. Back then, it was hit or miss. You went to the secondhand bookstores, and what was available, what was inexpensive, you bought. So you read not with a specific plan in mind. And I think in retrospect, again, that helped because your reading was kind of eclectic. Um, and it probably shaped the interest because, for instance, I remember this thing. I think I told Amit about this. I remember Dad once coming back with AJ Leibling's book on boxing. Uh, and I mean, we used to wait for him to come back every alternate week and go to this weekend. He would go to this secondhand bookstore, Mo Market in Chennai, and come back with a bag full of books. And a lot of it was based on how much could be afforded at that time. And apparently, this book was for $1 or 1.5 rupees or something like that. And I remember my mom saying, "What the hell is wrong with you? I mean, what is this boxing book doing over here?" But I read it, and suddenly I realized that sport made for great writing. Uh, so you didn't you didn't actually develop an interest in any one thing. You discovered things here and there. You discovered what short stories could do when you read, say, the Maupassants or the Sakis, uh, you know, some of the Russian masters. You discovered what nonfiction could do when you read books on politics would come in, either Malayalam or English. So yeah, uh, there was that. And in school, like I said, if you were being taught a particular play of Shakespeare, you were also encouraged to read books, uh, critical appraisals of those plays, things like you weren't just asked to memorize the lines and then regurgitate. So the fact that it was that kind of environment at home, plus the kind of institutions that I was fortunate to study in, I think, yeah, together that shaped the love of books. I think that's a fairly common, like you said, Amit spoke about pretty much the same thing. I think that's fairly common back in the
Yeah.
particular. Yeah,
Yeah, I actually asked him how his dad's upbringing was, and just to understand, it had to start somewhere, right?
right.
Because not everybody would have had such a sort of a reading habit in the family and so on. So I was just asking him where it would have started, and apparently
Hmm.
his dad did not have the kind of upbringing he had. So yeah,
Yeah.
it's very interesting. And to your point about the influence of Russia in Kerala, Russian literature in Kerala. I
Mhm.
mean, I actually know quite a few of my dad's friends who have Russian names, Russian first names in Kerala. I think
Yeah,
this.
sure. Lenin, Stalin, all of them are fairly
Yeah,
common.
Mishkin, Pushkin,
Hmm.
and so on. Yeah, fantastic. Again, I just want to touch on this. Completely fine if you don't want to answer this, but what was your experience with drugs? How did you first get into it, and how did you get out of it? I'm just asking this so that it could be an inspiration for people who are listening to it.
I don't think in my case there was a definite, I want to try this kind of thing. I think it is more, like I said, and this was uh, early in college, in Madras district. Two things. One, it was a very vibrant, very lively kind of place. Again, there was a lot of focus on. See, we had professors who weren't very particular about whether you came to class. They were particular about whether you did the work, and um we were encouraged to study on our own and then go up to them. They almost all of them stayed on campus. You could go up to their homes and ask them if you had any questions, etc. So you had a lot of free time. It was a closed campus in the sense that 180, 185 acres of forest in this college set in the middle of it. What happens inside that college? It's like Las Vegas in that sense. Um, so and the kind of people who were the late screenplay writer, director, actor Pratap Potan was my college mate. His elder brother Joe was he was pretty much good at everything. He was brilliant at music. He wrote, directed, and acted in plays. It was that kind of crowd. And obviously, there was a lot of experimentation, both in terms of drugs and in terms of sexual experimentation. Uh, so I think it was just the kind of crowd that you're hanging around with. You're basically practicing music, and somebody is passing a joint around when you smoke. But that was also the time when I started getting very uncomfortable with the science stream, particularly zoology. I hated cutting things up. You had to dissect frogs and cockroaches and all that stuff. And I felt a sense of repulsion, which obviously disqualifies me from cutting human beings. So, so you basically bunk class, and then you're in the company of others who bunk class for various reasons, and there is joints being passed from you. What happens, I think, or at least what happened in my case was, it was nice to be high. Uh, you just picked up your drum, the sticks, and started playing. Somebody started playing the guitar, there was a sing along. So you want more and more of that. Community depth, I mean, where one joint would give you a nice buzz for the rest of the day, it got to a point where you need multiple. Then economics kicks in, because to buy that much of dope, you might as well buy a small ball of opium. So yeah, it starts to escalate almost without your being aware of it. You don't realize that you've gone from a casual user to an addict. An uncle of mine was a doctor, and these medical representatives give you all these free samples. I discovered Mandrax, which was, yeah, it was a Dharma role. You take yourself high, and then you balance it out by having one of these pills. It was based, in one sense, it was a sleeping pill, I guess. But it was used basically by addicts. So I flick all those samples, and look, it's very hard to, I mean, in retrospect, you can do a narrative about how and why you got into drugs. I don't think there was any thought about it. I don't think I was escaping from something or thing. It just happened one step at a time, which is pretty much, as I discovered in retrospect, it's pretty much the story of a lot of addicts. You don't realize you're getting addicted until you are addicted, after which it's a bit too late to do anything.
And how was coming out of it? Because you mentioned that you moved to Calicut back from Chennai.
Yeah. Um, Coming out of it, I think, like I said, I wasn't quite aware of how far down the road I'd gone. And I don't remember what happened on that particular day. I don't remember it well enough to articulate it uh, in definitive terms. What I do remember about it was just a day like any other. You started out smoking up first thing in the morning. After you wake up, you go to college. Somebody or the other has got something that you want to hit on, and uh, at some point in the day, I think I went a bit too high, and I remember coming back home. I didn't want to be in college. Um, for some reason, I just left. I came back home, and I was subsequently told that I'd swallowed half a strip full of man. Now, I don't know if I swallowed it out of some depressive state of mind, or whether I swallowed it in an effort to bring myself down from the high I was on. Uh, Fortuitously, mom was having a bad day, I think headaches and uh, some kind of stomach upset or whatever. So she came earlier than expected. And when she came home, she saw me passed out on the bed. Again, fortuitously, there was a doctor about two doors away from my place. He normally comes home for lunch. And this happened to be around that time when he was just about to leave for work again. So he came, realized what was happening, and I believe the strip of non-righteous. A lot of this was told to me subsequently. I believe that strip was there, so he noticed that and realized what had happened. I think they pumped out my stomach, took me to. And there's also the problem of attempted suicide becomes a police case. So he used his influence, took me to the hospital, got me cleared out and stuff. And then the routine blood tests and all that, I believe they realized that I was on drugs. Um, So sending me back to the same college was not an option because it would be the same atmosphere all over again. They decided that because my grandparents were the ones who brought me up from the time I was born, they decided that that was a good place to send me back. How did you come out of it? In my case, it was cold turkey. I think when I woke up, there were tubes all over me, and I had absolutely no idea what had happened. I had no idea how I had got to that point, and I think that scared me. Um, I mean, I have a lifelong horror of even if you're having a drink at a party or whatever. I stopped well before I realized I'm buzzed. Um, I like having a drink once in a while. I don't like being out of control, and I think that was there even back then. It's just that I didn't realize how far gone I was. But when I woke up and I realized that I had absolutely no memory of what had happened that day, why I had done what I had done. In fact, I mean, I was taken to a psychiatrist, and my memory is that even the questions that he was asking, it was about what are you upset about? Why are you trying to kill yourself? I wasn't. I mean, at least I'm not aware that uh, I think that helped. It wasn't easy because while this thing is getting out of the system, you get cramps, you get, uh, it's incredibly difficult. But I didn't want to go back to the place I was in. So I guess, I mean, I don't know. I don't know how to articulate it. I got lucky, I guess. Uh, and like I said, my uncle was a doctor. I was, for the time that I was coming off the drugs, I was staying with him. He was working. He was a government doctor at a place called Sultan's Battery, on the Wayanad region, the Western Ghats. I stayed with him so that he could keep an eye on if I was really getting very bad, he could sort of, stabilize me and whatever. I remember it took 3, 4 months for me to not need drugs anymore. But yeah,
Yeah, that's incredible. I mean, thanks for sharing it.
sure.
Yeah, Prem. So you moved to Mumbai and you started to
Uh,
work as more of like an apprentice in Free Press Journal, or was it Chennai?
no, no. Chennai was basically freelance work, partly for Aditi, and then you think at some point shut down. But there was a city magazine, sort of like Sunday in Bombay. I mean, sorry. I think there was a Bombay magazine. There was a Chennai magazine called Aside, which was edited by the historian and writer Mr. Abraham Erali. He saw something that I had written on the Indian Express, called me over, and he would give me these assignments, city stories, some politics, sometimes investigative stories. It's not a regular thing because he was mostly working with freelancers, and there were a whole lot of them, I think. But there were a few, and at some point, I suppose today we talk about skilling and all of that. Back then, because Dad and Mom were both in telephones, I had learned to operate both the PABX system, which was the telephone switchboard at the time, and the telex machine. So there was a time when I was handling telex for the Indian Post when it was first started. Uh, Mr. Bhagwan Singh was the correspondent, and I was a telex operator. But Bhagwan fairly quickly realized that I could write. So things that had to be, the shorter news stories and stuff, you just say, hey, can you, make a few calls? The press releases would come in. So you look at that and he would pass it on to me and say, make a few calls and can you quickly send the story? The funny thing was, there was only Bhagwan Singh in that uh, place. This was in Chennai. He was the only correspondent. So what would happen was that all these stories would go in his bike. And what happened was that he went to Hyderabad. He was covering the whole of the South. He went to Hyderabad once to do a fairly major story. And at the same time, something big broke in Chennai. Uh, so I covered the Chennai story. He covered the Hyderabad story. Both of them are important enough to get bylines. So on one day, he had a byline from Hyderabad and a byline from Chennai, which is when somebody in the Bombay office realized that something's off. Uh, so there was this call and all that, and then they said, no, no, you can't do this. You can't have some random guys just writing stories. He's a telex operator. So yeah, so that was the end of that. And then, like I said, Free Press, it was they needed desk people. Mr. Vijayan Kanampalli was the editor at the time, and I think he was just looking for trainees or whatever. Um, so there wasn't much of a test. What he did was he took me on for a 1 month trial period. By the end of the month, I was pretty much handling the front page, so I didn't suppose it was a trial period. It just moved one to the other. I think it started with he had written an edit, and I saw it on page, and I saw some sort of random error in that. So I corrected it myself, which you're not supposed to do. I didn't know these rules at that. The next day, Mr. Kanadanam came in and asked who had done that. I said it was me. So then he started running his edits through me to check. And then one thing led to another. He said, why don't you try handling these pages? Then it became the front page. So yeah, about 8 months there, and you learned a lot. It's a very small organization bringing out a full-fledged newspaper. I think there were about 12 people on the staff. So putting a newspaper together means you do everything, including page design, makeup, selection of stories, all of that. So yeah, that was where it started.
Yeah, you mentioned that you did play quite a few sports in college, and
Well,
seems like you had a love for sports as well. You also read a lot of books that were sport related, and I see that you have worked on different fields of journalism. Like you have covered the elections, you have covered Bollywood also a little bit, you have covered cricket. And I'm a huge fan of your articles in cricket. I happen to come across a few of them over the years. How did the passion, like, how did the love for cricket start? Was it the Chennai days? Because Chennai has a huge, the so-called knowledgeable Chennai crowd, and it has a very, very passionate cricket crowd, if I may call it.
yeah, I think there were two things. One is cricket uh, sport largely because what used to happen in Madras Christian College High School back in the day was your PT period was not a matter of simply coming there and doing these exercises and whatever. What used to happen was we had 5 grounds. Um, there was a football ground, hockey. There was one for cricket. There were two for cricket. One of them was for the school teams to practice on, and one was a general thing. There was a basketball court. There was a track and field facility. So every week, each class had to rotate. So this week was football, next week was hockey, and there would be a bunch of the physical education director would be watching, but also there were a lot of these guys from YMCA who would be walking around watching us play. So when you're playing as a class, it's just a free for all. But what they would do was keep an eye on people, and if they saw some sign of natural talent, they pull you out and put you into specific coaching. So it turned out that I got pulled out for both cricket and football. Um, I was also fairly good at the medium sprints, the 400, the 800. And Christian College High School had a very proud tradition of sport. I think in my final year, there was something called the Cadbury Shield, the Inter-School Athletic Championships. That year was the 35th year in succession that we had won. So basically, I mean, Christian goes there with the for knowledge that you're winning. It's kind of like Australia playing one day cricket. You're winning more often than not. In fact, we were winning continuously. So that was a love. I mean, that basically was a love for the practice of actually playing. I loved it. In fact, I loved pretty much everything about cricket, not just the batting or the bowling part, but I even loved fielding. And again, Venkat was very anal about that sort of thing. Uh, he insisted that every single person should be athletic, should be good fielders. He would today we have words like cross training and all that. I remember back in the day, Venkat was the one who recommended some of us play badminton because it improves your foot speed, agility, your ability to, change direction, all of that. Uh, so yeah, but cricket writing, again, it was purely accidental. Uh, I'd never thought of doing sport. I'd never wanted to, in the sense of, not in the sense of I don't want to do this, but in the sense of it never occurred to me. Initially, it was all politics. The Bollywood thing and all that you were talking about was incidental. When we were working in midday, for instance, yeah, there was. I was still doing. I was doing features by that time, writing my own features, but also as features editor for the midday features team. There were about 7 of us. So I was leading the features desk, um, helping put together the Sunday magazine. Uh, I don't remember writing cricket at all. It also helped that in midday we had a stellar sports desk. There was Sharda Ogra, Prajwal Hegde, uh, sorry,
Yeah, huge fan of Sat Dogra, by the way. Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, Hemal Ashar, and they were all brilliant even back then. So there was really no need for anybody else on the sports side of things. Harsha used to write for us. So that was a fairly big team and big in the sense of quality. Um, so sport never occurred to me. It was only when Readup started and we kicked off very close to the World Cup. This hard launch was in January of 96 and the World Cup was February 14, 96. We didn't have anybody to cover cricket. Harsha was busy with commentary and stuff. So he could only write the occasional piece for us, but he couldn't cover match by match. Somebody had to. There were only about 7 of us. So by default, it sort of fell in my lap and it's like, okay, you're covering cricket. Fine, whatever. That's what it. And what started as a stopgap arrangement then went on till about 2000, late 2001 or so when I got fed up and I said, I'm done.
Yeah, however, I actually read some interesting pieces of yours in 2016, especially relating to Harsha Bogle. And yeah, you actually mentioned about, or spoke about Harsha Bogle's, cancelling of Harsha Bogle's contract with the BCCI. And it was
Yeah.
actually very interesting for me to read. And it goes like, quote, even in regard to cricket commentary, games organized by the BCCI have a contractual condition that there can be no criticism of the BCCI or its selection process, thereby curtailing an exercise of free speech. I mean, it's fascinating why that is the case, and is it any different in other cricket boards?
I'm not aware. Look, there is turmoil in all sorts of cricket boards. Pakistan, for instance, in the recent past has had, I've lost count of the number of coaches, the number of heads of
Yeah.
PCB. Sri Lanka, the administration is a mess. Uh, the West Indies has issues. Um, it's not that issues of various kinds are restricted to or a feature only of the Indian Cricket Board. But the Indian Cricket Board, unlike others, has been extremely anal about what is said or written about them. And that is not even a recent feature. I remember when Rediff, we started reporting on cricket, when the matches are on, you're doing previews, you're doing post-match reports, you're doing analytical columns and stuff. But in the interregnum between series, there's nothing of that kind to write about. And at that point, we were looking at, okay, what are the finances like? We stumbled on a set of their annual accounts books, and we found all sorts of bizarre things. Uh, and so we had done a series of investigative pieces about what money are you earning and what are you spending it on. We realized the kind of scams that were being run by the BCCI at that time. And the immediate upshot of that was that, but it wasn't actually written down on paper. Uh, Dalmia had passed an edict that Rediff was never to be given passes for any matches. We were never to be given accreditation. We were never to be given passes, etc. So this kind of censorship has always been there. Putting it in a contract is relatively new, but even that is not exactly new. All of that started during that period of, Pawar, Srinivasan, the IPL came up. Suddenly when there is a lot of money at stake and you have an opaque administration, it stands to reason that the administration doesn't want you to look. One of the journalistic axioms is follow the money. It's one of the first things that you learn as a journalist. If you want to know why something is happening, you're looking at who benefits. Again, that's a question that journalists are taught to ask themselves in order to figure out where the story is. Who benefits? Where's the money? Those kind of things. Those are precisely the things that the BCCI does not want spoken about. So yeah, I mean, you see that all the time. You say something critical of the BCCI as a commentator, and the next thing you know, you're dropped until maybe you recant or you get back in their good graces somehow. Yeah, that is peculiarly, I think, a feature of the board. And it's possible because it's not that probably other boards don't want to do it. I'm sure that, say, the PCB or the Sri Lankan board or whatever, they don't like all their machinations to be out there in the public domain. But they don't have that kind of money power. Here, the thing is, if you are friends with the BCCI, they can make your life. It's a good job being a commentator. 5-star travel, accommodation, good money. And considering that we play cricket non-stop, it's almost an endless, I mean, it's a day job, right? You're just moving from one tournament to another, one country to another. It's a brilliant job. So you have both the carrot and the stick. Be nice to us and you keep getting gigs. Say something against us and you're out on the court.
Yeah, yeah, I've noticed that about BCCI even posting highlights on its channel. It is so pro-Indian, so pro-Indian batsmen, and
Uh,
and a lot of the times when foreign cricketers come to India and they do this 25 to 30 minute interviews, they're always asked this thing that, hey, what do you think about Virat Kohli? What do you think about Rohit Sharma? And yeah, I don't know why they do that, but according.
because brands,
Yeah.
uh, look, I mean, it's not just that they're cricketers and high-performing cricketers. It is also that the amount of money that is riding on them. Uh, Big brands, they endorse big brands. The same brands, when there is a tournament, they are the ones who are advertising. They're advertising because right in the middle of the tournament, it is my star, no, uh, he endorses my product. So the BCCI gains from the fact that these superstars get these big endorsement contracts. which in turn leads to advertisements on match days, all of that. So it is a symbiotic relationship. And obviously, the bigger the brand value of a particular player, the more the money that is coming in, not just to the player, but also to the board, uh, to the player directly, to the board indirectly because of the sponsorships and stuff. Uh, so it is in the interests of the BCCI to talk up the players, uh, to make sure that their brand value doesn't deteriorate. Now, if you keep saying that a particular player is sort of, living on past accomplishments or whatever, it's not a good message either for the player himself. So, yeah, once big money entered the sport, all of this became
Hmm.
it's a combination of big. It's not just big money. Look, there is big money in a lot of sport. There's big money in football, for instance, or some of the American sports. But it is more a question of a big money plus an opaque and almost impenetrable administration. The two things together sort of it's almost the perfect fraud triangle: means, opportunity, and
Yeah.
ability.
Yeah, and the typical muscle flex that they do, and we saw it
Yeah, sure.
completely in the organization of the 2023 World Cup, right? The schedules were published so late. They moved the schedules, and it was difficult for people from outside the country to get visas because of how late everything was published and all of that. Yeah.
Yeah. Which basically was, I don't know if it was deliberate so much as it was just incompetence. I mean, Sharda also had a brilliant piece in Caravan about a couple of months back about Jay Shah's BCCI. And the point that really should stand out from that piece is where she talks about how every single thing, even the smallest thing, needs Jay Shah's implementer. Now, if you do that, the organizing cricket and we keep seeing all the headline tournaments, the World Cups and the IPL and stuff like that. There's also a lot of there's Ranji Trophy going on. There is, various kinds of there's a women's cricket going on. There's all kinds of things going on, and it requires a tremendous amount of management. Then you have, while these things are not going on, you also have, are you going to upgrade the stadium? Why? How much are you going to spend? So the number of things that you have to juggle at any given time is hard enough for a highly qualified administrator.
Mm.
Highly qualified administrator is not a phrase that I would employ for Jason. So, one, the workload is immense. Two, you have this, authoritarian head who's not capable of handling the work. So, in the middle of the IPL, his focus is IPL. And it's only after the IPL is over that you wake up and say, oh shit, there's a World Cup coming up. Ab kya kare? So then you're looking at the stadiums and realizing how much of upgrades are needed. They're looking at various other factors. One of the unfortunate side effects of that was that pretty much every stadium you saw very, very few fans of the other teams. Almost none. I mean, if you looked at the final, there wasn't even a yellow shirt inside. I think there were about a handful of Australians, but that was it. And then you also have this triumphalism, this overt jingoism. You wanted. I remember an Australian journalist who documented the fact that when he went to the shop for the kit, where the official kit was being sold, you only had blue. There were no Australian caps. There were no yellow
Yeah.
jerseys. After the match, everything came back on the
Yeah.
shelves. So this kind of look, I mean, there is the cricket team itself, which was doing its thing, and I think there is a lot of conflating and making the cricket team also responsible for this. I don't quite believe that. They did what they were asked to do, which is how which is the only option they have. But as far as the other thing is concerned, I think it was entirely a matter of the board deciding that this was going to be this huge triumphal procession, culminating in this at the Narendra Modi Stadium, with Narendra Modi handing over the trophy to, all of that stuff, and basically wanting this to be a sort of a triumphal procession starting from day one all the way till the day of the final, 46 days of unbridled India is the greatest, Vishwaguru in cricket as well, kind of rubbish. And yeah, it worked to the detriment of the tournament itself. I mean, I don't, it, every World Cup that I can think of, there has been various, controversies. Uh, but I haven't seen one that start to finish had quite so many things going wrong. Every single match had some issue or the other. Overall, there was this whole thing of, you know, uh, tickets not being fully utilized, fans not being able to get the tickets, and then finding that there were empty seats all over the place. All of that was very weird, pointless, and ultimately had the opposite effect of what was intended.
Yeah, apparently they had already planned for like a procession kind of an exit after winning the World Cup and all of that. Just yeah.
Yeah, sure. Uh,
Yeah, I mean, just to quickly touch on the World Cup final itself, what are your thoughts? Was it the pitch, was it the selection, or was Australia just a better team?
it's a mix of pretty much everything. Selection, I don't know what else you could have possibly done. Uh, there's a lot of post facto commentary about maybe you could have used Ashwin
Yeah.
as a third spinner. But considering that both the spinners who actually played are capable of turning the ball, and barring a very few instances, there wasn't real grip and turn of that deck. It was nice and slick. Uh, this is why even Jadeja, who is normally extremely accurate and when in the helpful conditions can turn the ball, he wasn't getting much turn either. Uh, if Kuldeep wanted turn, he had to slow it down to such an extent, and the turn off the pitch was so slow that batsmen had the time to adjust and to play. So the pitch certainly, which raises kind of a question: whose bright idea was it to play on a used pitch for the final of a tournament? Because if you look from the commentators' box and to the both to the left and right, on the left there was a pitch that was used but in much better condition. On the right of the pitch that was actually used, there was actually a fresh pitch which had never been used. It had a light grass covering. All you had to do was remove the grass, and you had an absolutely perfect. It was actually a pitch that was laid for this tournament. So, yeah, I mean, the minute you decided to y- play on a used pitch, you pretty much skewed the game in favor of the team winning the toss. From then on, it was Australia read the game better. uh, Pretty much every respect. There was that, I think Bharat Sundaresan had written that piece about how Australia figured that black soil eases off on the lights as opposed to red soil, which tends to
Yeah,
grip.
and Ashwin also
Um,
recently made a comment that he spoke to
yeah,
George
that he,
Bailey. Yeah,
George Bailey, that's right, who said the same thing. So, yeah, I mean, the point is that in a final, particularly, you want conditions to be as level across the full 100 overs as possible. There will be some ups and downs. For instance, if Dew had come, it might have been a bit of finish. Dew didn't come to that extent, to the extent of actually interfering with the match. But those kind of things would have happened anyway. Uh, the toss would have had a part to play, but I don't think it would have had this much of a part.
yeah,
Once Australia decided to bat, I mean, to bowl first, and they figured out that the way to go was once the ball was 5, 6 overs old, just slow everything down. Uh, but don't put anything in the driving or hitting arc of the batsman. Pull the lengths back, slow the ball down, wait for the ball to reverse because the pitch would have been abrasive. Uh, yeah, they basically played the best game of their their tournament, and we probably played considerably below
Hmm.
par in all the points. I mean, batting, bowling, and fielding, we went.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. What surprised me was Rohit Sharma saying that they would have batted first as well. So I don't know if we just read the pitch wrong.
So yeah, I remember posting about it on Twitter, and a whole lot of people said, "Look, Rohit has been saying that pretty much whenever he loses the toss and he's asked to go to bat first or bowl first, he says, yeah, that is what we were planning to do." Maybe it was just mind games, or maybe he actually wanted to bat first and put runs on the board, whatever. Uh,
Yeah, we will never know.
those that you can speculate about. Did he mean it? Did he not? The fact of the matter remains that the minute and it's not clear who is the deciding authority here, because I think even in the semifinals, for instance, Atkinson, who was the ICC's nominated person to look out for pitches, was complaining that the pitches changed at the last minute with some interference from the board, from the Indian board. Generally, for an ICC tournament, it is the ICC pitch in charge that decides pitch and playing conditions. Uh, who decided to use who decided to use a used pitch? Why is probably something that we'll never really know unless somebody from the ICC opens it.
Hmm.
But Wood was a really sort of put India behind the eight ball as it turned out.
Yeah. Yeah. That makes complete sense. Prem, you have actually seen cricket administration for like 20 years, so to speak, and you mentioned to me that Rediff wanted to cover the 1996 World Cup, and then you also saw a time when IPL came into Indian cricket. How do you see the change? When I say change, I particularly mean about how cricket administration is run or how BCCI is run. Is it flexing its muscle more after IPL came, or was it any better back in the day?
Well, in a sense, the BCCI had been flexing its muscle. I mean, there's the famous story of how the then BCCI president didn't get tickets, and
Yeah.
that is why
Asia Cup, yeah.
the no, not just the Asia Cup, even the this was in the for the final of the '83
Yeah.
World Cup.
Oh, they worked with the
And
PCB
then
chairman and brought the 87 World Cup. Yeah, right.
yeah, to India and stuff. So we've been flexing our muscles any chance we get. The more the money, the more you're able to flex your muscles. Because look, even if you look at major tours or major cricket matches being played outside of India, you see a lot of Indian brands advertising. Uh, because I mean, they are operating on the principle that all of this is now relayed live in India as well. There is an audience. So they advertise. A bulk of the advertising is coming from India. So yeah, it's the whole you pay the piper, you get to call the tune kind of thing. I think even before uh, the IPL, during the time of Dalmia, he would get what India wanted. He would with the BCCI. So I think from '96 on, when real money entered Indian cricket, you had the Lions World Cup, you know. Uh, when all of that started happening, '96 World Cup, I remember one of the funny things was there was not a single item of consumable that did not have an official whatever partner. So you had the official toilet paper. I mean, you didn't have a toilet paper, but you had pretty much everything else. There was an official this, an official that, an official soft drink, an official everything was official. In fact, funnily enough, I think that was the World Cup where Pepsi decided to uh, mess with Coca-Cola, which was the official soft drink of the World Cup. And Pepsi ran a campaign saying nothing official about it and made it a very fun, lively sort of campaign. So more people noticed the Pepsi campaign than the official campaign of the Coca-Cola. But the point is, yeah, I mean, pretty much every single administrator that I've seen in my time from Dalmia through Pawar, through Srinivasan, all of them have basically ensured that Indian cricket got whatever it wanted out of the ICC, out of the member countries. They got to decide schedules. They got to when IPL started, they wanted a window. They got it. Uh, so that's always been the case. I don't and it's not particularly surprising. And look, I mean, we talk a lot about how India dictates. Before that, Australia and England pretty much dictated how cricket would be run. At that time, they had the power. So it's just a natural progression. The power shifted. I mean, the hand holding the power shifted, and therefore the ability to dictate also shifted initially to the subcontinent, and now entirely with India. And I'm not entirely critical of that. It's how it works. Uh,
It's maybe more about what you do with the money, right?
what you do with the
Yeah,
power.
what you do with the.
For example, I mean, if your entire preoccupation is going to be getting more and more time for IPL, there's talk about having a second edition of the IPL within the same year, or a truncated edition, or a champions kind of thing inside. So if you're going to do that, it is at the expense of other things. I mean, even the World Cup, for instance, one of the standout stories of the World Cup was Afghanistan. We don't play them. Uh, a lot of the smaller countries are languishing because the big three or the big four don't really play enough against them. And how are you going to develop? So you're not using your power. Use your power for your own game, sure, but maybe a little bit for others as well. And that is
Yeah,
what is
maybe
missing
send a
with it.
B team or an A
It's like,
team or
look, I
something,
mean,
right?
yeah, that uh, make sure that they get adequate chances. I mean, what's your end game? You can't have a sport which only India plays. Um, so for me, my problem is how are you using that power? Also, there is what is crept into the game is a certain lack of grace, a certain awareness of sport as an entity. It's all about the money that we are making. Look, we are tough. We are this, we are that. We have the power. We'll do what we want. Um, it's become almost like a street thug as opposed to a professional body. And that leaves a bad taste in the mouth.
Do you think because of this oversaturation of cricket, and I'm just speaking this from what I talk to my friends about, is that we are seeing more people, at least in the big cities in India, move to other sports like Formula One, football is catching up quite a bit. Do you see that happening?
I don't think oversaturation of cricket um, ha- has a direct correlation with people moving to other sport. Yeah, you could say that partially in the sense that for me to follow a sport, and even though I don't write cricket, I follow sport pretty much a lot of the sport that I'm interested in. For me to follow it, it needs a narrative. In fact, the reason why I gave up writing on cricket was simply this that one inconsequential series or match would be followed by another. I never saw the point of that. And you can't keep, writing good stories about things that didn't matter. Um, for instance, we're playing a series of T20s right now against Australia, and both are B teams, both are coming off the World Cup. You can't have a series like that 5 days after the World Cup and expect people to get worked up about it. There
Yeah,
is no
fun fact,
narrative.
Vizag was packed
There is
though.
no context. Sure. Look, if you play in the smaller centers or even the big centers, I mean, you play it in the
It's like
Wankhede,
a
you'll
good
probably
night out,
find
I
it packed.
guess. Yeah, yeah.
It's fun, right? Yeah, yeah. So that is there. But what
Right.
was the point? You probably wanted the team to rest, recoup, sort of. spend some time thinking about, okay, what did we do right? What did we do wrong? Where are we going from here? Uh, what's the next big thing? It's the World T20. We keep talking about we haven't won an ICC trophy since 2011. What are we going to do to position ourselves for the T20? You want all of that happen. Uh, you want time and the mind space for that kind of thinking, that kind of conversation. You want half your players landing up and playing this T20. After that, God knows what else you're doing. Uh, so that is one part of it. But even from, I mean, 96, when I started doing cricket as part of the Reed cricket team, uh, onwards, it was just one game after another. One of the reasons why you burn out is because one, you're playing in all kinds of countries. So one series is in the West Indies. You're covering it from here. You're not actually covering it from the grounds, which means you're leaving home at about 2 o'clock in the morning to get to office in time for the match to start over there. Next thing you know, it's in Australia. Another day, it's in England. It's all kinds of time zones. I didn't realize that it was possible to get jet lag sitting in it, because, but it kept happening to me. So this thing of having constant cricket has always been there. I think one of the reasons why people are drifting to other sport, on the one hand, you don't have a narrative for a lot of what is happening on the cricket. At the same time, pretty much all your major leagues, La Liga is streamed live. So is the Premier League. So is Copa America. Um,
Yeah,
all the
even
leagues are
NBA
available
actually.
right now. Yeah, the NBA is available. You can see it in real time. You can go back and replay the entire match. You can see the highlights. It's a lot of, and the internet allows you to look. I'm no longer tennis, for instance. I'm no longer captive to the Indian newspapers sports page. So if that is, I mean, it has shrunk from 5, 6 pages back in the day to one page, 1.5 pages now, all of which is filled up with cricket and fairly basic writing on cricket. It's more hagiography than actual thing. But I can go read Steve Tignor on tennis, and I can read some of the great writing on football in the Guardian, in the Independent, in the Times. Um, so so yeah, it's opportunity. Earlier, I couldn't follow these. I mean, pre the internet and even in the pre 2000s and stuff like that, the time you got to see high quality football was when the World Cup was telecast live. That was it. You never had any idea who these players were until they came to the World Cup. You saw that, and then you waited 4 years for the next one. Today, it's like, yeah, I mean, I can see all these players playing
Yeah, yeah.
365 days in a year. So that itself, and also a younger crowd that, you know, see, in our case, for example, I remember mom and dad were extremely passionate about cricket. Uh, uh, Both of them watched, they argued, they had their favorites, and that's where I grew up with me and my sister. Uh, so cricket kind of dominated. Um, Again, the World Cup was only for once in 4 years. Yeah, you all sat around that. Or the slams happened, and once they started getting telecast, you sat for the slams. But that was it. The rest of the time, it was all cricket, and that is the atmosphere we grew up in. But if you look at my nieces, for instance, who are in their early to mid 20s, they're growing up in an atmosphere where, I mean, one of them is so into K-pop, for instance, that she actually learned Korean. She speaks fluently, and as it happened, her job took her to Korea as well. That was a bonus. But the point is, they're not growing up in this thing where the only conversation is about cricket. Uh, they have choice. They're no longer bound by, even if I wanted to watch something else as opposed to the cricket match, the remote control was on my dad's. So, So it's a whole thing. It's a societal change that is happening. Again, sports bars, for instance. You go in there and you find a lot of football being streamed. And even if you weren't thinking about it, you just catch sight of it. Hey, that looks interesting. And gradually you get it. Peer pressure or peer example, if you will. It's not pressure so much, but my friends are all talking about Indian Premier, I mean, or about the Premier League or about La Liga or, any of the major leagues. And I want to be part of that. I want to be part of the conversation. The only way I can is if I actually start watching these things.
Yeah,
So
combination
it's
of
quite,
factors. Um, just one final question on the cricket aspect. You covered cricket in the late '90s,
uh
and we hit this whole match fixing scandal. Do you think cricket is a lot cleaner now?
going to get into trouble for those, but I don't think so. I don't think, look, the conditions. So if you think back to the period of match fixing and stuff, one of the things that say, for instance, people like Krishna Prasad and Anirudh Bell, who did that piece in Outlook magazine that burst the whole thing open, what they'll tell you is that while the talk was about spot fixing or corruption, let's say, um, in cricket during the time of, say, Mohammad Azharuddin's captaincy or Hansi Cronje's captaincy of South Africa, etc., people who uh, have been part of the cricket reporting ecosystem will tell you that these things have been happening much earlier, even in the previous generation. It stands to reason if there is money, there is some form of, if there is money and you're not getting a due
Yeah,
share of
that's
that
one of
money,
the reasons why I asked, because people
it's
are
it.
compensated way higher than the '90s.
They are. But look, here's the thing, right? Who do you know who's got a lot of money and who says, okay, you know what, I have it. Once you have money, you're like, okay, and 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 you don't have to do anything. Somebody is coming to you with these offers. Look, I mean, 1 crore, 2 crore, whatever, just do this anything. Do I know specific examples? I don't want to go there. But what I notice, or what I keep coming back to is the conditions that conduce to corruption back then and the conditions that exist today are pretty much the same, except that they've scaled up exponentially. So for me to believe that suddenly every single cricketer, not just in India, but around the world, is suddenly be complete. As in Marlon
Yeah.
Samuel's just been banned for
Mm-hmm.
6 years for corruption. So it's not like corruption's gone away. There are still the odd instances of something popping up, and this is what people know about. I would imagine if I was part of the ecosystem and I've seen what happened, I mean, how for instance, the Hansi Cronje incident was caught because cops were tracking or tapping the phone of another suspect in another case. I'll be a lot more careful about how I discuss things, with whom I discuss things, and who is in a position to know I'm doing this. Uh, so basically, yeah, I probably that would happen, but I'm not sure that suddenly, oh, okay, this needs to be cleaned up, and suddenly everybody becomes clean. Corruption hasn't gone away from any other aspect of our lives. Uh, there's considerable naivety involved in assuming that it is completely eradicated from the cricket ecosystem. And again, I'm not talking
Yeah.
just of India, talking
Yeah.
of
Yeah.
the
Absolutely.
ecosystem.
I mean, yeah.
Also, the more meaningless matches you play, the less there is for a player to lose if he indulges in corruption.
Hmm. That is.
Why did Sharjah become the epicenter? Because, I mean, who cared? Who cared who won that or lost? So it was just a tamasha that used to keep going on every once in a while. So you go there, you have fun, you have people coming in taking you shopping, you have people coming in giving you expensive gifts.
Yeah, that is so true. I never thought about it like that. Yeah, I mean, back in the late '90s, it was thrilling to watch matches in Sharjah because it was this tri-nation tournament and all of that. But yeah, there is a
Yeah.
hidden side or a hidden aspect to it as well. Um, yeah. Uh, well, Prem, now moving to general journalism, uh, I've had this thing going on in my mind. I'm based out of the US and I follow NPR quite a bit. And I just wanted to discuss about funding and ownership of news organizations. So NPR is funded primarily by private member donations and sponsorship from corporations, and it is a non-profit media organization, whereas BBC is more of
Yeah,
getting funded by taxpayer money. So it has to cater to a lot more of the population. It has to cater to everybody,
correct.
and through TV licensing fee and whatnot. Uh, Now coming to media and broadcasting organizations in India, we have Doordarshan, but with these private players coming in, how bad has the journalism gotten in India? And a lot of it is government sponsored. When I say government sponsored, it's like party sponsored, and all of that, and then media houses have to sort of dance to the tunes of these parties and all of that. And Doordarshan obviously has declined in popularity. Not many people watch it. So, where did we go wrong? And is there a solution to this?
Yeah, I think coincidentally at this point in time, I've just over the last 2 3 days, I've been reading two books back to back about the media. One is Martin Barron, who was the exec editor of the Washington Post, writing his memoirs. It's called Condition of Power. And Adam Nagorny has written a book called The Times, which looks at um, a 5 decade period of the in the history of the New York Times. Uh, Besides the political aspects of what the Post or the Times covered during that period, both these books talk about the quantum shift in how journalism was practiced once the internet became a thing. The early days of the internet, it was an outlier. People said print will still dominate, etc. I think, well, generally, Indian media missed the bus is they did not anticipate what the internet would do to traditional forms of revenue. For newspapers, for television, it was all about spot ads. Internet came in. But as the audience started shifting to the internet, look, back when radio started, there was no audience in India. It was all outside of India because who in the hell had internet connections in this country? Then slowly companies came online. So you access the internet through your office. It's only after a period of time that your broadband, I mean,
Dial
not
up, yeah.
broadband even then, but access became slightly easier and you could also access from home. Initially, even that was a privilege for those who worked in those industries and therefore needed a laptop at home and all of that. But it was a gradual process. It then suddenly escalated once um, broadband speeds ramped up. It became far easier to connect. The smartphones came and everything came in. And so consumption moved to the digital space. And in the beginning, what used to happen was that you sold your page views, which was possible when you had 10 or 20 sites. You had the legacy media, which is basically doing shovelware, taking what was there in the print edition and putting it online as well. So whoever wanted to read online. And you had sites like Reading, for instance, which are standalone internet sites. Uh, so effectively, your entire operating principle economically is you want more of an audience, you want more page views. The more page views you have, the more page views you can sell. And therefore, that is where your revenue is coming from. And now you have what? 500 sites, 1,000 sites. And I'm talking about sites that people actually go to. It numbers in the hundreds. All of them are chasing the same metric, page views, audience. Basically, what happens when you overproduce something, its value comes down. So the page views that you're spending all your time chasing with your clickbait headlines, with your say nothing. This thing you take a Twitter comment by somebody and make a story of saying, oh, this person said this on Twitter. All of that is to generate more and more page views. But the more page views you generate and the more page views your peers generate, the less the likelihood that those page views have any value. And this is a perishable commodity. Nobody wants to advertise on yesterday's news pages. It's recency matters. So that shift, what could possibly happen when more and more sites come into play, more and more page views, more and more audience comes digital, is something that nobody really anticipated, nobody planned for. And even now you're doing the exact same. You're still chasing your page. Which means your revenue model is broken. Once your revenue model is broken, you are captive to either the business person who comes and says, look, I'll take a major fraction. I mean, I'll take a major share of your equity and I will fund you. But there are, like they say in these documents, there are conditions attached. Or you're captive to the government, which says, do what I want you to do, and you will get ads and you will get these whatever conclaves where the prime minister will come and the big ministers will come, and therefore the advertisers will come. That has become a revenue stream. But that revenue stream depends entirely on the cooperation of the bigwigs in the government, starting from the prime minister on down. The Hindustan Times just had a conclave last week. The prime minister was there, the home minister was there, the defense minister, the finance minister was there. Pretty much all the big ministers. Panels are. Therefore, audience, but it's as easy for the government to withhold their participation, in which case nobody comes for you. So what are you going to do? If your livelihood is dependent on being on the good side of the government, that is going to have a depressing effect on the kind of coverage that you do. When that happens, what is also going to happen is that the reader turns away from you. So now you're on the wrong end of this vicious cycle where, you have to do something for the sake of survival, but the very thing you do for survival ensures that you have less and less relevance. What's your front page headline? Amit Shah says we will win Rajasthan. Why is that a headline? Why is that a front page story? I mean, I can't think of a single political leader who will, on the eve of an election, say, "Oh, we're going to lose back." Right? But every damn time it happens, it's just very thinly disguised propaganda masquerading as news. I'm not painting the entire media with this brush. There are exceptions, but by and large, the problem for the media is that it is not able to figure out how to survive in this new world. It doesn't know where its money is coming. And I mean, if you look at the ones that succeeded, since you are in the US, the New York Times turned it around after flirting with bankruptcy at least thrice that I can recall. They turned it around by understanding what the digital ecosystem is, what they could offer that would actually make people, not just in New York or not just in the US, but around the world, pay for. The Washington Post did the same. Atlantic, New Yorker, among the magazines, for instance, the big magazines, right? Even, say, for instance, about Boston Globe. I subscribe to the Texas Monthly, for God's sake. Brilliant journalism, excellent writing, roster of, if you look at their master, the names are like names to be conjured with people like Mimi Schwartz and Skip Hollandsworth, Pamela Koloff used to be part of it. You have great journalism and people are willing to pay for that. But that requires investment. Whereas over here, what you see is, look, I mean, I was thinking of, because we spoke of Sharda, for instance. Sharda is now a freelance agent. I can't think of a situation where she's allowed to be on her own, where somebody hasn't snapped her up and made her the head of sport, because she has a history of, from 1990 till today. And when you see her in a setting where there are sports persons, and not just cricketers, any sport, where there are sports persons present, you see the respect they have for. She's got the contacts. She's got the know-how. She's got 40, 50 years worth of knowledge stored inside her. That's a precious resource. You would want her as part of your team, not just part of your team. You would want her directing traffic. You don't, because you have to pay her a good sum for this thing. She's reached a point where she can command a good fee, and you decide that that's not worth, or that your bottom line can't afford a shutdown. So basically, people with institutional knowledge have all moved out, and you take people who you can pay a pittance or a fraction of what you would have to pay a shada, and that reflects in the quality of your content. So it's the Clintonian formulation. That's the economy is stupid. You haven't figured out what this economy is all about. Therefore, what your options are. You keep oscillating between, okay, let's get some more page views. From there, it goes to, all right, let's try putting a paywall in place. You put a paywall in place if behind that paywall is something that I will pay money to access. Simply putting a paywall is not going to do it. The earliest paywall was what, 1996, the Wall Street Journal. Nobody else, at least in the US ecosystem, uh, Times flirted with going online. And the first time Times did that, what they did was they asked people outside the US to pay, I think, some just $30 a month or some such. And fairly soon they gave it up. Wall Street Journal said, look, I mean, we help you prosper. We help you figure out your finances. We help you figure out what's going on in the markets, things like that. It is of value, quantifiable value, and therefore they put a paywall, and they've never had a reason to rethink that.
Interesting.
But for that, you have to actually invest in the kind of content that I will pay for, right?
Yeah, interesting times
So
we speak because
if you don't,
I think News Laundry and News Minute are trying to join hands, and it's completely a subscriber based.
yeah, and that's not, interestingly, you mentioned NPR. NPR and the New York Times joined up to fund, say, for instance, people like Pamela Koloff. Three, four of the best journalists in the country today work on that kind of system, right? I mean, two or more media houses coming together and saying, okay, we'll pool in funds, and we will both carry the fruits of some of these star reporters, and they are all given the time, 6 months, 8 months, to work on one long form story that it really stand out, which is a Pulitzer candidate, for instance. So yeah, I'm incredibly happy that News Laundry, News Minute, and I think for the elections, even Scroll is joining, and Wire, all of them are putting together a team to cover the election results. Uh, it's one of the things that you need to do. Pool your resources. You have the multiplier effect kicking in. But legacy media always has been pretty slow to sort of understand these things and there is this arrogance of, we are whatever, this brand or that brand or whatever. We don't work with small fry. That kind of thing. So it's self defeating. What do you hear about pretty much every year? Those the number of layoffs that have happened. Why are you doing that? Because your bottom line is, uh, even after the layoffs, your bottom line is still not uh, balancing out. So next year you have another round. What does this do? It means more and more talent leaving the office. And you're not going to lay off the people at the bottom tier of the reporting structure because you're paying them peanuts in any case. You're going to slice off the top.
Yeah,
So
yeah, interesting.
what is it they say in business? You can't do the same thing today that you did yesterday and expect a different result.
Yeah.
The Indian media has been doing that for the last 10, 12 years.
Yeah, interesting thoughts. Prem, I want to touch on your out of Eden Walk team and your journey for the National Geographic about water issues in India. How did you transition from the kind of journalism that you were doing pre this endeavor, and now you are associated with Peoply, which I will get into soon. But how did this shift happen?
Um, I think it was a radical shift. Look, what a journalist does is engage with the world as it is at any given point in time. And if you think of the 2000s, the 2000 late 2000s, for instance, we gradually became aware of environmental degradation, of climate change, etc. These started getting more and more space in the global conversation. Obviously, as a journalist, we want to know what the hell is going on. So there was that. Then 2010, when I took over at Yahoo India, uh, by then I was reading up about this, trying to figure out where all of this was going, and from an editorial point of view, you want to know how to wrap your head around it so that you can figure out what coverage makes sense. What is it that people need to know right now? So during that period, it was mostly about reading and trying to understand what was going on. At which point, I also happened to meet Arti Kumar Rao, who was already immersed in this kind of uh, theme and subject. She did work she worked with us. Uh, One was something called River Diaries, where she was walking along the Brahmaputra, writing about what was happening to our rivers and how that in turn was impacting, say, for instance, agriculture in the region, which was then causing out migration, because lands were getting, degraded. Agricultural land was getting degraded because of environmental reasons. Um, so it moved from just trying to understand to actively working with people who were in that field and who were reporting from that field. So 2014, end of 2014, by then we had done quite a bit of work on environmental issues itself. End of 2014, when I quit Yahoo, a few of us, there was Kalyan Verma, the photographer and visual storyteller. There was Rahul Bhatia, Aarti, me. We got together. We were talking about things, and we said, look, one of the things that the media has gone away from is what we used to call beat journalism, where you were looking at a particular subject and that you specialized in, which meant that you were the go-to resource within the newsroom for that particular thing. Um, and we realized that because that had gone away, some things that have long-term or continuous impact on our lives were not getting covered properly. Uh, for instance, I mean, Aarti's River Diaries was in 2011, 12, somewhere around that, 2012. Uh, Now you're getting increasing focus on rivers, saying, the dams on rivers are causing issues. All of it is things that Aarti had seen and written about for Yahoo a decade ago. In which sense she and very few others were incredibly prescient. So we were looking at all of that and saying, okay, what are the critical issues, not the ones that you're seeing on the surface, but what are the critical long-term issues? The environment is clearly one of them. And by environment, it takes in the whole thing. It takes in the coastline, takes in rivers, takes in land degradation, takes in out migration, people moving away from agriculture because there was no money in agriculture anymore. All of that was important. Development, as we call it. What is development for, and how is it actually playing out? For instance, if you look at, you've got a highway being built to connect the Chardham thing. And ever since then, all you've had is landslides and some disaster or the other in that entire sub-Himalayan region. So the question is, what kind of development are we investing in? Is that the kind of development that we should be doing? What are the pros? What are the cons? What is the consequences? What are the long-term consequences? So there was development, there was environment, there was man-animal conflict is one of the things that doesn't get spoken about. It also maps to environmental concerns. So there was that. So we decided that, look, I mean, let's try and put together something that looked at all of this. Um, Clearly, there was no funding available for that. So we spent our own money on
Funny
people
enough, the
uh,
your Wikipedia page
until we
still
ran out.
says Prem Panicker is looking for funding for people. I just noted.
Oh, really? Oh, I didn't know. Uh, no, I mean, look, we kind of, I'm not saying that we won't love it if funding came our way, but we kind of gave up because we realized that the world we're living in right now is not, the people with funds don't see the point of doing something like this. And the people who are genuinely interested, keep, even now, I mean, Aarti gets calls from various people. I get calls from various people, though people with a great deal of interest in this who don't have the money, unfortunately. Whereas people who have the money can put it on the table and they're like, okay, yeah, what is the point? How many viewers will you get? What is the page used? What is, they don't realize that this is critical. This needs to be reported on. This needs, and it is not about, if all I wanted to do was generate page views, I'd be doing Bollywood. And I wouldn't be making any money there, right? So, for instance, for all your emphasis on paid views and how many audience and how many unique users, which site is making money out of any of this? The end. But when it comes to important things, this is the first question. So yeah, we started deeply with that intent. We carried it on as long as we could until we pretty much bankrupted ourselves. Um, and one of the side benefits of doing what we did was that Paul Salopek, who does the Out of Eden walk, first noticed River Diaries, what Aarti was doing. That was the Brahmaputra thing, and got in touch with Aarti and then with me. And from then, yeah, we kept up in the background. We would talk to each other about how this. He started his walk in 2013, so there was, the timing was also right. So as he was coming towards India, he was like, "Look, will you guys be walking partners?" There were others as well. Priyanka Bhojpuri, for instance, Siddhartha Garwal, quite a few, about 7 to 8 people took turns walking with. Yeah, that was another uh, one of those life-changing experiences.
Just regarding the whole funding thing, what was the attitude? I don't know if you reached out to philanthropic organizations. I mean, there's the Rohini Nilekani Foundation. Now there is Rain Matter by Zerodha, Nikhil Kamath, Nitin Kamath, those guys. Was that ever an option? Did you look at that?
Uh, I put it this way, without taking names, we looked at pretty much everybody who was in a position to fund something like this, and we struck up. See, the point is, if you're looking for 5 lakh, 10 lakh overall, you probably raise them. But if you want to do this right, you're thinking in terms of something like, and also to build it to a point where it becomes self-sustaining. Uh, our reckoning, and it's not just sort of, off the top of our heads kind of thing or back of the envelope calculation. We actually spent a lot of time figuring the whole arc out. What do we do first? What do we do next? How do we get to where it's not about profit, but about being able to sustain itself? And we figured that it'll take about 3 to 4 years before you reach breaking. Uh, During that period, if you're thinking of doing the kind of reporting that PP has done, uh, you're talking of a spend of anywhere from 2 to 2.5 crore a year. And that is without us paying us on salaries or staying in fancy hotels when we travel and all of that. Uh, because this means immersion. If you look at some of our these stories, for instance, there was a story of water in the desert, a series of stories which struck me. It took her a year of multiple trips to the deep desert to really get a handle on that story. These are not things that you just go there, talk to 5 people, come back and write a story. It doesn't make sense. To see what is happening to an environment, you have to be present in that environment. You have to see what is happening. Then you have to trace it back to when did this begin. That's the kind of reporting that makes sense. That is costly. Um, that's it. 2.5 lakh, three, I mean, 2.5 crore, 3 crore a year. Is that a huge amount? I don't think so. But apparently the people with money do. So
Do you have any
that's where
comment to
it's.
make on what Pari and P. Sainath have gotten it right, or have they, regarding slow journalism, rural reporting, and all of that?
They've they've stayed with it. The nice thing about Pari, for instance, is that they've taken one incremental step at a time and gradually built this out. So, for instance, starting with Sainath doing most of the heavy lifting, then getting people, training them up, getting them to a point where you could let them drive the narrative. Now you even have things like Pari working with people like, say, for instance, Aparna Karthikeyan, who's done that entire series on agriculture in Tamil Nadu, various on pieces. They've been doing it right. They've been doing it systematically, and uh, I mean, yeah, hats off to them. It's not an easy thing to pull off. Uh, the sad part is you look at what they have accomplished with so little, and you realize how much more value they could bring if there was adequate backing. Not saying they don't have backing at all, they do. But what if you could fund an initiative like that and say, look, but do the best that this requires? All of this is happening at a time when the world is increasingly beginning to worry about climate change, about global warming, about environmental degradation, because it started hitting home. And it's not hitting home just in India. I mean, where you are, for instance, um, California, Florida, New York, likely to go under. All of these are growing concerns. At one point, it was like, somebody said that and people laughed. Now I think New York is actually working on how do we ensure that this doesn't happen. There's a huge amount of investment going into making it future proof. Uh, so yeah, these are global concerns, and some parts of the world there is an emphasis on this kind of reporting, but yeah, we're still a long way from where we need. There is more of it now, definitely more of it than we saw back in 2010 when we first thought about this. So, uh, but yeah, I think it's too little and it's
Do you
almost too
think
late.
it has gotten to an irreversible point?
Yeah, because look, for instance, you have which is one of the other things that Aarti and I had looked at, coastal erosion. You're saying we're 63% coastal erosion across the country. Now, you don't want to look at averages because 100% here and 0% here works out to 50% if you average it out, which is not how it works. But we've actually walked large tracts of Kerala as coastline, for instance. That's not 63%, it's closer to 80, 90%. But the beaches
I
are
have an anecdote
non-existent.
about
You
Shangamugam
have,
Beach in Trivandrum. It looks, yeah.
yes, Sangomugam Beach is gone. As is Kovalam Beach, by the way, which is right next to,
Yeah.
I mean, it's just before Sangomugam, if you're looking at it. There is no beach there. But those are tourist things. They're important, yes. But move further away towards the Bhimapalli, Valyadura, that region, the beach is gone. Sea walls have been erected. How do you expect farmers to go, I mean, the fishers to go out into the sea? You have no fishing harbor. I mean, the fishing harbors are gradually getting, uh, lost to this. And it's escalating. Now, you can stop it at this point, but the more it escalates, and now it's gone along the length of, I mean, Chellalam near Cochin, for instance. It's gone all the way there, from Trivandrum through Kollam, all the way to Cochin and beyond. The beaches in Kasaragod side been affected, and that then spills over into the Karnataka region. So once this starts unless and until there is an official realization that this is escalating way too fast and that it's causing problems, you're going to really not be able to turn it around beyond a certain point. For instance, because you brought up shampoo, what are you going to do? You can't grow a bit, right? So what is gone is gone. What you can do is at least prevent more from going and also mitigate the effects on the people who have been already affected by what we have lost. You have a lot of fishers who are still, I mean, who lost their homes in the monsoons 3 years, 4 years ago, who are still living in shelters, refugee camps.
Do you do you th-
So when you talk about, and this is just the coastline, right? Now you think about what is happening, say, in the sub-Himalayan regions where you're indiscriminately building highways for God knows what reason. You have landslides, etc., coming up, and that is causing. You're building dams. We saw one major disaster in Sikkim 2 months ago. You're building dams without really taking into account the environmental factors. You're not even listening to your own experts. You're not doing a proper environmental survey before you do so. That is causing destruction. How are you going to turn that? You've got cities that are weak in those parts of the world. So I think at some point, first it is stop what you're doing, or at least stop the wrong things that you're doing. Arrest the slide, then start looking at how do you mitigate going backwards. But for all of that, there needs to be awareness. It's not that the government is not aware, it is that the people are not really aware. In fact, the fundamental idea behind people was, look, I mean, if these kind of things have to stop, you can't expect the government to stop it because they're the ones who are doing it in the first place. And at this point in time, I'm not talking about the BJP government or the Congress government, period. What you can hope for is that the more people know why they are facing the kind of crises they are, there will be more of a noise about it. Politicians are amenable to or receptive to an uproar about what it is. And that starts with understanding this. So yeah, is it, when I said it's almost too late, almost is the word I would stress on. We have time. We can't get back to what it was. Some of the damage is for keeps, but we can prevent the damage from spreading and we can prevent it from escalating.
what were your major learnings from the walk with Paul Salopek? Was coastline your major area that you covered with him?
No, we never walked the coastline. We walked, Paul's walk basically was from the Wagah border all the way to Manipur, from where he crossed over into Myanmar. I didn't walk entirely. I mean, I didn't walk anything like that entire stretch. It was just small parts of it. But I mean, there are lots of things to learn, but I think the one thing that I came away with more than anything else is what happens when you get out of the city. Look, as journalists, pretty much what you do is something happens somewhere, you fly to that place. You know what you're looking for. You want to see what happened, and so that you can describe it. You want to talk to a few locals. Aapko kaise laga kind of thing, and you put a story together. Here, there was no agenda. There was no story, we were just walking, and we were talking to the people we encountered. And by definition, uh, you're reaching a city maybe once in 5 days or 6 days. Or the rest of the time, it is through village roads and through, you know, desert patches, and you're encountering a camel a day here, or a pastoralist somewhere else, and an agriculturalist or whatever. There's time for conversations, and you realize that the world that you see as a journalist, that you have familiarized yourself with as a journalist, is not really the world that exists out. Once you move out of that city and that city-centric way of talking, once you start walking and having conversations without agendas, without making it transactional. I'm talking to you because I have a story to write. When you move away from that and you have a conversation just to understand, you suddenly see an entirely different world. You see a world that you never even knew existed. I suppose at some corner of the mind you knew it existed, but you never really took note of that. Because for us it is disasters, something happening, things like the quotidian life of an average pastoralist, an average agriculturist, an average village subculture, a woman who uh, copes with, say, the husband is gone, migrated somewhere else, and you have to stay back home and cope with bringing up your kids and stuff. The income was negligible. All of that. You vaguely know that these kind of things are happening, but this was like, I mean, you were facing it, or you were confronting it day to day. The other thing that you realize is that just how good people are uh, beneath the once you actually start interacting with. I don't think that kind of walk is possible without the kindness of strangers. It's a cliche, it's overused, but yes, we've had people go so far out of the way to make sure that we were, housed and fed things that there are times when you actually, when tears come to your eyes, uh, think of the effort they take and all of that. And people who genuinely care. I mean, okay, fine, I've landed up in your village or your whatever, and you sheltered me for the night, and I'll leave next morning. But these people actually take your phone numbers, they call you, they find out if you're okay. And it continues to this day. We still get calls from people we met on that walk. If you don't call them once in a while, they get, upset and say, "Are you okay? Why didn't you call me?" Uh, yeah, so you see that India, and it leaves a lasting
What
impression.
areas did you walk with him? Like what parts of?
I walked a part of Punjab, part of Rajasthan, that's it. And then Manipur, again a part of Manipur. Uh, Aarti walked Punjab, Rajasthan, parts of MP, and then Manipur definitely. Um, Another colleague, Siddharth Agarwal, took over work. Priyanka Bopujani walked a lot through Assam and places like that. We just sort of leapfrog. I mean, it's a fairly big commitment of time walking the entire thing. Paul, that's what he does.
Yeah,
Uh,
quite remarkable 8 year
so yeah,
long journalism project. That's quite
and it's nowhere close to being over. He's in China right now, and he still has. I think he's halfway.
wow.
So
Remarkable. Anything that you heard,
and
you mentioned about you talking to people without any agenda, but in their responses, was there things that you heard repeatedly that struck maybe?
yeah, lots of things. I mean, politics. People who talk about what politicians are saying versus their own concerns. They're saying literally things like "Take especially. This is what we're looking at, a fair, equitable price for our produce. Not us, we're looking at that. I remember one farmer who I was struggling to understand where he was coming from when he said, "Look, I mean, I don't even want my kids to be doing this anymore, because if this is how it's going and I've been seeing it deteriorate, then by the time they are grown up, there's going to be no point in it." And I was like, "Look, I mean, can you break it down for me?" And he actually sat on the ground, cleared a bit of soil, and wrote down everything from how much he spends on seed to how much he spends on water, on power, on rent of equipment, labor, all of that, how long the cycle takes, how many times it needs to be irrigated, therefore what is the cost of water, etc., all the way to the harvest, how much he gets, what price he gets for it, and therefore the disconnect between what he's spending versus what he's earning. Uh, and he said nobody comes and addresses these issues. What they talk about is I mean, I don't want to talk about the issues because then it becomes uncomfortable about the BJP, but people were critical about how clueless politicians were or how disconnected they were from life and death issues that these guys were coping with. That is one of the things that you hear all the time. The others, one of the things that you pick up very fast is these people have things to say. Nobody cares. Nobody goes there. Nobody goes to some out of the way village in the middle of the Rajasthan desert just to talk to them. So for it's not just one place, it is multiple places where the fact that we wanted to listen, that we had come not to ask them specific questions, but we just come to be with them even for an evening or a night or whatever it is, that we wanted to listen to those stories. They were so surprised, happy, all of that you realize just how they've been, I mean, the vast majority of this country has been moved out of the national conversation, or they don't exist in the national conversation. And it's not that somebody specifically says this, it is what you pick up and you internalize from the way. Once they start talking, they don't stop. They just go on, I'll show you this and I'll show you that. And they're so full of things that they want to share and they haven't been able to because nobody bothered. So when a Paul lands up and says, tell me your story, for them it is like, you know. So yeah, on this, I mean, we talked about the media earlier. What are we covering? We're covering the statements of sundry politicians, and we're covering the horse races around elections and the gotcha kind of who did the enforcement directorate raid today and stuff like that. Where was the coverage of this 90%?
Yeah,
And if you don't know those stories, if you don't know what they're going through, where is the response going
yeah.
to come?
Only if you listen to them will you be able to even think about a solution, right? So yeah,
Listen, and since it's not possible for everybody to listen, then somebody needs to get these stories out to the rest of the world,
yeah,
right?
absolutely,
Which, again, is something that is worth investing in, people's stories, but those are not the
absolutely.
sexy things to put money in.
Prem, before we end this podcast, I just wanted to ask you how much of a reality is climate migration in India? Are you seeing signs of it? Is it getting worse?
Massively, yeah. I mean, there's no point putting numbers
Spiraling
to it
up.
because it just keeps escalating. But yeah, I remember RT once calculating with something like the entire population of Brazil is on the move, right? And we see there are two things to it. One is the numbers; they are huge, and they're not restricted to any one area. Uh, it's pervasive. Even areas that even states, for instance, that you think are doing well, there's massive migration out of there. There was a recent among the recent stories that data stories that came up. There was one about which state pays labor the most, or where a laborer can get livelihood. Then the lowest states. I don't want to name states again because again it gets into this politics thing. Or you're pointing a finger at that. But there are people who are actually doing day labor for 215, 216 rupees. That is on paper. How much they have to pay the agent who got in the thing and all that, we don't know. But this is the rated wage for labor. At the other end of the scale, you also have some states where they're being paid $1,000 a day. So obviously, there's going to be migration. On top of that, your riverine systems, your deltas, etc., are getting going because of excessive rainfall or less rainfall. Your dams causing flooding, all of that. Uh, Agriculture doesn't become a possibility. Therefore, you might um, even for instance, in Kerala, when we were walking around, I was startled. Uh, you go to talk to fishermen, and you realize that the boat is owned by a Kerala, fishermen, traditional fishermen was generations old. But I remember one which had 5 people as part of the boat team. 3 of them were from you. Uh, there were people working on those boats from Bihar, from UP, from West Bengal. You would imagine that West Bengal would have fishing of its own, but apparently not. They're saying it's no longer viable. So they've come all the way. And you find this along both the coasts, particularly the western coast, where you find a lot of migration. So yeah, the other thing about migration is earlier it used to be, look, I mean, if you think back to the 90s, 80s, 90s, etc., you had 1 or 2 places in this country that were magnets for migration. So the whole fable of you go to Bombay with $100 and you work hard and you become an Ambani or an Amitabh Bachchan or whatever. Today it's not like that. It's more people are just pinballing all over the place. So you leave your place wherever it is and you go to, for instance, when one part of the Out of Eden workshop, we've done workshops in 3 places. One was in Delhi, Chennai, and Kolkata. In the Delhi workshop, for instance, we had based ourselves in Old Delhi, and the people who were attending the workshop had to find stories within that region and actually go through the reporting process with us overseeing it and showing them how to do it better. And there was this family that one of the attendees came across, sitting outside New Delhi station with the entire, baggage, TV, all of that. Their story was they were from UP, farming family, small farm, 3 brothers with their wives, kids, all of that. So the farm was no longer capable of supporting them. So 2 of the brothers decided to leave the farm in the hands of one brother. And these 2 migrated in search of work. Where did they go? They went to, initially, they went to Rajasthan, day wages, working on construction. While they were in Rajasthan, and I remember they were being paid something like $215 manual labor at a construction site per person. Apparently, they then heard that in Punjab, certain cantonments, they were building more homes within certain cantonment areas. An agent came and took them to Punjab. The difference between what they were earning in Rajasthan and what they were earning in Punjab, if I remember correctly, was about 20-25 rupees. They all migrated because that 25 rupees does make a difference when you're talking 5-6 people working. And apparently an agent had come and told them that if you come to Delhi, you will get some $30 extra than what you were making in bank. So they had all taken a train, come to Delhi, and when this person, the colleague from the workshop, met them, they were waiting for the agent. So this reporter actually followed their story. It turned out that the agent came and took them to where they were supposed to stay, which is on the banks of the Yamuna, well outside Delhi. And their work was at the Red Fort. The ASI was doing a cleanup and they required laborers, and these people were going to work there. You're given $30 more than you were earning, but then they found that you're spending that $30 just coming to the wind, going back, coming to the workplace and going back. But that's how it's worked. $20 makes a difference. You will change a state because you get $20 extra. And then you also look at what happens. We're looking at the migrants and how they're living, and therefore the stresses they are putting on the host area, the state or the city. What about the people who are left behind? What about the women? What about the kids? No education, no future. In a lot of cases, no proper health care. And the uncertainty about when and if money will come. Because, I mean, these guys, it's not like they had regular employment and they don't. So, you go to pretty much any city, there's always a place where people congregate, and then this lorry comes and says, okay, I want 50 laborers. They take, and the rest of them are waiting, hoping that somebody else will come and ask for their thing. So it's an incredibly uncertain life. It's a day-to-day. thing. And we saw that during the COVID, for instance. The minute there was a lockdown, suddenly, or even right now, when you're saying that 80 crore people need free rations, you're saying 80 crore people can't afford to buy food to eat. We are 140 crore. So that is what? More than half. When you say more than half of a country needs free rations,
Yeah. Yeah,
that
I
should
never
scare
thought
you.
about it in this way that, the laborers coming to work down south may be victims of climate change. They may be victims of the fact that uh, rain did not come on time, or they did not get good price for their harvest, and so on. So,
Yeah, so we use climate change as some kind of shorthand. It's a combination of many things. I mean, you have your so-called development, which actually has impacts on existing ways of life. Now, the whole question of whether that development is necessary, whether it can be done differently, is another debate on. Point is, we're doing things without actually taking into account, fine, you're changing a place. But what about the people who used to live in that place? Have you made provision for them? In most cases, no. So there is that reason. It's not just climate change that is happening. That is also part. Rains have gone completely unpredictable. You're getting rains at times when you're never used to. We're not getting rains when you're used to. In the regular course of the monsoons, that is one part of it. You have the El Nino effect across these 5 years, started last year, so it's just going to escalate. You have that. I think again, I mean, from even during that walk, one of the things that you heard over and over again is how unpredictable everything has become. Because, well, for instance, I was brought up, like I said, I was born in Kerala, spent considerable amount of time over there. Fishermen, for example, could tell you precisely the time and the hour when the monsoon would set. So you go to places like Adimalathura, for instance, and they'll tell you, not today. Tomorrow afternoon after 2 o'clock. Before that, don't worry. And it'll be almost precise. Similarly, I mean, so all of this dictates when they go out to fish. They know if a storm is coming or not. They don't need the weather forecast. They have God knows what intuitive way of figuring these things out, but that is because they've been part of the land generational generations. They have this accumulated knowledge, and they tell you now that they have no means of predicting any of these. Uh, Farmers will tell you that. They'll tell you that, yeah, we plan so that rain will come during this period. This is when we plant. This is when we need irrigation. This is when we harvest. But now that's not. You're getting unseasonal rains. You're getting a huge amount of rains. Crops that cannot withstand that kind of thing. So suddenly the crop patterns have changed. We put all of this under the rubric of climate change, which basically means that we don't have to think about the individual causes and how each plays on all the rest of it and stuff. It's complicated, and that's exactly why you need
right.
that kind of slow journalism that you were talking
Yeah.
about earlier. Uh, you don't say, oh, this guy migrated because it's raining heavily in Assam and he can't think. There's a reason why for that also. There's a reason why it used to rain even before, but agriculture was possible. Why is it not
Yeah,
possible
I
now?
had
And so on and on.
Parth MN on the show, who actually works for Pari, and he said the same
Got
exact
it?
thing. When he
Yeah.
goes to Vidarbha, talks to farmers, this is exactly what they have to say. That what the hell should I do? Because everything is so unpredictable. Yeah. Uh,
Yeah. See, back, I mean, even 10, 15 years ago, uh, it's not like everything was wonderful. You had drought, you had floods, you had everything. But farmers had this comfort that they knew that a particular period of the year they would face this. They would face water shortage during this period. They would get rains to a greater or lesser extent. That is unquantifiable. But that rains would come during this period. They could plan their year. Even then there were stresses, the same thing. I mean, you're not getting a proper price for it, and all of that existed, but they had visibility into their lives. Today, you increasingly hear them say, I don't have visibility into next month.
Yeah.
And how do you live that? How do you live without knowing what tomorrow holds for you? And now, like the other statistic shows, more than half the country is living in that. So all this talk about, okay, we'll become a this trillion economy, we'll become a 10 trillion economy, whatever. These are nice
Yeah.
goals, yeah.
And sometimes GDP
But how?
isn't the right measure, you know.
I mean, you can become a,
Right measures.
yeah, none of these are the right measures. I mean, you can become a 5 trillion economy because, let's say, 2 dozen industrialists ramp up and those industries make a lot of money. But you will still have your 80 crore plus needing to be fed every single day. And the other part that people haven't looked at, this is supposed to be the period of our demographic dividend. I remember first hearing this about demographic dividend in the mid-80s, early 90s, when economists used to talk about the fact that, look, India is getting to be a younger and younger country. And the first time you went, yeah, okay. And then you keep hearing it. So you talk to them and say, okay, explain this. Why does this matter? And their answer is, no, the more people who work and produce something, the less people who are dependent on the state to subsidize them. So if you have a 70% plus working age population, that means only 30% of the people are beyond that age and therefore need subsidies. So it's wonderful, and particularly because at that exact same point in time, the rest of the world is actually going the other way. Less working population, more elderly, which is great. It all made perfect sense. So we're right there right now. And we have historic levels of unemployment. So your demographic dividend is being wasted every single day because the people don't have work. So it kind of begs the question, if you knew back in the 80s that this was coming, did you plan for systematically? Did you think of, okay, that kind of, even then you had unemployment. So were you stepping back and asking yourself the question, if you're going to have this kind of a huge workforce, what work? What are we training them for? What should we be training them for? What opportunities should we be opening? At no point did we still have the same broken education system. We still have shortage of schools, colleges, universities, all of that. And once you come out of it, you have nothing to do. Which is why, I mean, I've sickened out of reading these stories in a sense. Railways opens up, say, 1,000 jobs. These would be, track maintenance. And you will find BAs, MAs, PhDs, MBAs. Last time that is what MBAs looking to do additional. So, A, people are not finding work. B, those who are finding work are underemployed. I mean, they've invested a lot in developing certain or acquiring certain knowledge or ability, presumably.
Yeah.
And then they're doing this, or they're doing gig work, delivering food for Swiggy and Zomato things. It's just, we don't seem to think holistically about a thing. It is all patchwork. The last few elections, it is like, okay, we'll subsidize your food, we'll subsidize your education, we'll give you free laptops, you'll give you this. You get your votes. Does this translate into anything meaningful? Is that going to make more people employed? Is that going to make more people or less people dependent on, state subsidy, free food? No, but that's not our
Yeah,
problem. We
that
just
is
need
so
to
true.
win the
Any
election.
success stories that you can think about? Tamil Nadu, maybe special economic zones, so many.
Yeah, so Tamil Nadu, I remember, I mean, when I was growing up over there,
Yeah,
it was like
right.
8:30, 9 o'clock, the city went to sleep. There was nothing there. They turned it around. And one of the interesting things behind that is uh, that their governments have been at loggerheads throughout. The DMK and the AIDMK that is under Karnanidhi and MG Ramchandran couldn't stand each other. Then Jayalalitha came. Again, there were issues between the DMK and the AIDMK. But and power has changed hands. There's been a period of time when Jayalalitha had lost and there was a DMK government. The interesting thing though is when it comes to development, when it comes to infrastructure, when it comes to attracting, foreign company manufacturing, which is basically what Tamil Nadu concentrates on,
Hmm.
every government carries on the work of the previous government. Karnanidhi started the SEZs, the SIPCOTs and all that in one area. He had this thought about, look, we can't put all these companies right in the middle of the city because it will cause enormous
So
jams. So he started developing the
Sriperumbudur, yeah.
OCR and all of those routes. Uh, yeah, all of that. But the next government came in and continued that exact same thing. The thinking has been uniform. I'm not saying it has been perfect. I'm not saying it is without problems, but the infrastructural development has been incredibly impressive. Or you go to a place like Kerala, for instance, there's all this talk about what does Kerala have? Does it have an industry? Does it have this? You're dependent on inflow from your migrants, whatever it is. Um, I remember people from so the last 1 year or so, we've had various weddings in the family, and we've also had some deaths, and there's been gatherings every now and again. And I remember friends from across the India who had come for one of these events, and almost one of the first things they said to me, they'd been in, they decided to come for the event, but before that, they came a week earlier and basically stayed put, just to generally travel around the place. And somebody came up and, one of them came up and said, one of the things that I noticed, I didn't see any beggars on the streets. That's true. Where do you find beggars in here? In fact, there was this thing I remember when my wife and I had gone to Kochi and she'd gone out for a walk. So we have this habit of if we eat in a hotel, there's always food left over and you think, just as long as you haven't actually dipped your fingers in, you ask them to parcel it. You will find somebody in need, so you can hand it over. Uh, so it so happened that she had a couple of samosas that she didn't eat. So she took it out, and there was this apparently elderly gentleman sitting in a bus stop looking kind of tired and stuff. And she gave it to him and he threw it. So what do you think? I'm not a beggar. I'm sitting over the bus. And my wife got flustered and came and asked me, what was this? I said, don't do that, not in this state. People are fed. They are taken care of. Whatever. You know, I mean, the rest of it, are you in debt? Yeah. Half the states in this country are in debt. But these things are taken. So there are success stories. I'm not saying that everything is. What I'm saying is, do we learn from each other's success stories? Do we pass on this institutional knowledge? Do we work together? We talk about federalism. We talk about states coming together on various things. I don't see signs of that on the ground. It's more like a competition. Can I lure away the guy who was going to come to your state? Uh, so how that works, I don't. I mean, there are things you could learn from the Kerala model. There are things you could learn from the Tamil Nadu model. What the hell, yeah? There are even things that you can learn from the Gujarat model. But do we transplant these things?
Hmm. Yeah, excellent. Prem,
Don't.
on that note, we'll end this podcast. Thank you so much for your time. Lots of insights. It's going to be a challenge naming this podcast because we covered everything from your life as a journalist to cricket to climate change to slow journalism. But that's for me to take care of. But thank you so much for your time. It was a truly enlightening conversation. Yeah, thank you.
Accurate, is